process. But what I wanted to do is give a basic structure of how do we move from where we are to where we want to go. And in order to do that, we have to have some kind of structure. So if you look at this thing, I say we need to answer 7 questions, basically. And there's a lot that goes into those 7 questions, but those are the 7 questions that I want to cover today. The first couple are really, or the first 2 or 3 are really more sort of philosophical. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on that. Most of the time, I want us to build on solutions. Real, concrete solutions. Now, I'm going to tell you that I am not interested in spending my time attacking the people in the party, right? That's just not what I'm into. But that doesn't mean I'm not going to identify problems that need to be fixed.
Thank you.
Okay? So this is not, I'm going to say that I think this is a problem and here's how I think we should fix it. And the conversation is going to go on between us to address that. Fair enough?
Yep.
Absolutely.
Fair enough. Now, I obviously have some insights, I have some opinions, but I am absolutely not the end-all be-all of this. This is meant to be collaborative. I want you to feel like your voice can be heard. But what I don't want to hear is just venting. Okay? That's not what we're here for. Okay? So, with that said, I want to deeply, deeply appreciate Lori and, of course, Alex, who helped put this together. Thank you all so much for your time. Okay. So, if you have one of these documents, the first question is, where are we? And I don't mean geographically where we are, okay? What I mean is, okay, we're at a spot politically right now. We need to come to some understanding about where we are. Now, the first thing we need to understand is that we are back in the same situation of Republican control of the state house, the state senate, the governor's house, and now the court as well. So are we better off than we were before 2018 in Florida? No.
I should think.
No, we're not. We may have picked up a few seats here and there, but we haven't done anything materially to change the status of where we are. And even though we did have some successes, and obviously Amendment 4 passed, it's I warned people from the very beginning that we have a habit in this state of passing referendums and then putting them in the hands of a legislature that has no interest in actually implementing those referendums, right? So that's kind of where we are statewide. We are in a place where the Democrats are not being taken seriously in our state. We look discombobulated and without a message or a direction. We had an outstanding gubernatorial candidate. I think most of us would agree with that.
Yes.
We also had what I thought was a Senate candidate that was a heck of a lot better option than the Republican one. I think we could agree on that. But there was some kind of massive disconnect. Because as hard as we were working to turn out Democrats, the Republicans were working just as hard to turn out Republicans. And quite frankly, they were more efficient and effective than we were, because we had more people to pick from, but the few that they had, they turned out, which is an asymmetry. Now, one of the things that Republicans have going for them is a symmetry of messaging because they have Fox News. And Fox News is always talking to their voters. Our voters may or may not be talking to MSNBC or CNN or just each other or nothing at all. And so we have to understand that. But I also want to give you some context about where we are politically nationally and where does Florida fit into all of that. Obviously, you guys are paying attention to what's happening in the news. Our president is a criminal, such as La Vida Loca. The question is, does that necessarily translate to him being ousted either before 2020 or in the 2020 election? Does that necessarily translate? No, it does not. No, it does not, because the people who support him don't mind his criminality. They consider it picayune, or to a certain extent, they view a certain kind of person able to swashbuckle as they kind of see it. That's just kind of how business is done by a certain class of people. They don't mind when those kinds of people do it. They mind when anybody else does it, but they don't mind when that class of people do it. And that's sort of, they consider it the sausage making of politics, right? On their end. But there is a sea change that's going on nationally, and we have a really great opportunity in 2020, an incredible opportunity in 2020. There's a whole lot of people that are feeling some kind of way about what's going on in D.C. The question, though, is what is that going to look like in Florida in 2020? That's the question. That's where we live, right? That's what we care about. Now, here's the thing that we need to understand. We have 0 statewide races in 2020. 0. We don't have a senator up. We don't have any kind of major referendum that's been worked on already. We literally have nothing that's going to be statewide in Florida. So what we're going to have is a presidential candidate and a whole lot of energy around the presidential stuff, and then state house and state senate races. Why? Because the congressional races, that which would flip, has flipped. So basically we have a whole bunch of gerrymandered red districts and a whole lot of gerrymandered blue districts and very few that are considered purple, and not a high likelihood that Washington is going to invest in those that are even remotely possible. This district used to be considered a flippable district, but we have back-to-back 8-point losses in this district. Do you think the D-Trip is still interested in flipping Florida 18? Debatable at best, right? We certainly shouldn't bank on that. And what we've learned is that flipping Florida 18 is a really tough trick, right? It's going to take a very special candidate to do that, and it's going to have to be done in a context where there's some damage on the Republican side. Because people, even people who don't like the Republican Party, have found themselves liking Brian Mast. Now, in my view, some of that is messaging failure on our part. But in any event, he's now becoming a name, a recognized name in the area. And absent some kind of real problem, he's going to continue to get reelected unless we do something really dynamic and special. I don't want to spend this conversation talking about Florida 18. I want to spend this conversation talking about Florida generally. The reality is we as Democrats are going to have to come up with a strategy that turns out voters in a year where the presidential is going and pretty much nothing else but state house and state senate. And not only that, but a presidential election isn't going to focus on Florida. It's not going to. I mean, Barack Obama did something really unique with organizing for Obama, right? OFA was this unique thing. But as far as I can tell, it's the only time that's ever worked. Right? When he did OFA, he rendered the FDP machine kind of superfluous. And the problem was people who came to organize Florida realized that it needed something to talk to voters. And so they created OFA. But when OFA was done, so was that organizing structure. And we tried to recreate it. Hillary tried to recreate it and work through the party. That did not work. Did it work? No. So now we see that we've tried it one more again, and did that work? No. Again, I'm not attacking any individual. I'm just looking at results. Did it work? No. So what we need to do is understand that we have a serious problem, because what we have here in Florida, which we've had for a while but will be even more magnified going into 2020, is that we don't have a spokesperson, we don't have a leader, we don't have anything that speaks for Florida Democrats. Now, the Republicans have Ron DeSantis speaking for them, or Rick Scott speaking for them, or Sean Hannity speaking for them. They always have a person who is titularly and visibly speaking and leading on the way the Republicans see the world. The question is, who does that for Democrats?
You.
Okay, so that's where we are. We are in a situation where we don't have anybody who is the spokesperson of Democrats. We don't have a race that is going to be Florida-centric, that is going to energize and excite people. We don't have a machine that speaks to Democrats in a uniform way like Fox News speaks to Republicans. We're working with less money and less resources, so the question is, should we throw up our hands and give up?
No.
Hell no, that's not who we are. That's where we are. I want to move on to point 2. Are you satisfied with my analysis of where we are? Does anybody want to add something to that? Yes, ma'am.
I think right now there isn't a single person that we feel could go up against Trump nationally. I know you're focusing on Florida, but Florida is part of the national scene. But I've been encouraged recently with Joe Biden coming out and being a little bit more forceful and a little bit more focusing. So maybe give it a month for January and let's really see what happens.
Excellent point. How things are going to show up, thank you for making that point. How things are going to shake out presidentially, it's going to depend on what that field looks like. Right now, we've already got 36 people that have already filed papers to be president. You've not heard of a single one of them, so that tells you something. But whether it's a traditional establishment Democrat that emerges or whether it's somebody new and fresh like a Beto O'Rourke that emerges, whether it's a businessman like Bloomberg, whether it's a Eric Swalwell, somebody like that, is it somebody like Bernie's always part of the conversation and what is that going to do? We have like 0.0 control of all of that. But one thing I do know is that whoever our Democrat is, they're going to have a tough time if they don't win Florida. That I do know. Because I don't see Idaho going blue. Color me crazy. So the electoral math is kind of where it is. And I think most people are starting to move Ohio into the red category and calling it more plum than purple. And most people may be moving Pennsylvania slightly more to the blue category and calling it more lavender than purple. But all bets rest on Florida. They do. And Obama, the first time he ran, had the advantage of having a Senate race on that ballot. And the second time he ran, he had the advantage of a Senate race on that ballot. So, not saying that Bill Nelson was the most exciting candidate on the planet, but he was a well-known name, and there was an operation around him. And at a minimum, that gave you a more robust ballot to energize people with. And we had Patrick Murphy on that ballot and some others. Like, it's just going to look different this time because we don't have all of that middle stuff. And that's going to become a real challenge for us if we don't start thinking about it right now. Yes, ma'am.
I think that Florida, though, we can't really presume one way or another about it. It's going to depend a lot on whether we're able to get the 1.45 million people who
We're going to get to that.
whose rights have been restored. So it's sort of hard. Well, no, I mean, well, I know the part of that, the question mark is there's a bunch of question marks in there.
Excellent. There's a lot of question marks in there. Yes, Ricky.
Yeah, we have to fight.
Yes, we're getting to that. Hold, please. Yes, we're getting to
We
that.
are too wimpy.
Yeah, true.
and
We're getting to
turn
that.
people off.
Okay.
You know, we gotta fight.
We got to fight. I want you guys to try to stay with my agenda because we're going to get to that exact issue. Because the next question I ask is, who are we? First, I want to clear the table. Where are we? Are we clear about where we are? We are facing a major uphill battle, a major money gap, a situation where we are not going to have any statewide candidates. We're going to have a whole lot of infighting over our presidential primaries. We should prepare for that. And a likelihood of re-energizing the rift between the progressives, the establishment, and everybody else. Are we in agreement about where we are?
Yes.
Okay, let's move on to who we are, because I think that's really important. Yes, sir, in the back, you had a question.
I disagree.
Okay.
Sherrod Brown won in Ohio.
Uh-huh,
He was a progressive Democrat.
uh-huh.
I wouldn't give him the state quite yet to the red. The Democrats across the country outraised the Republicans by tons of money.
Yes, they did.
We have one issue, and one issue only,
Which is?
voter turnout.
Yes.
We have so many more Democrats registered than Republicans, and if you add the independents,
Yep.
that's a big difference.
Please grab an
And
agenda.
don't make the assumption that Trump will run again.
I'm not making that assumption at all, because he may be in jail. If there's a God, he's in jail. Okay, I think you make an excellent point, sir, and you're right. I'm not trying to make a full analysis of what the presidential field looks like. And I do think your point about Sherrod Brown is a good one, and I also think your point about Donald Trump is a good one. But we also need to understand that whatever happens at the presidential level, while the Democrats outweighs the Republicans nationally, we did not do so here in Florida. While we got a 10 million vote advantage in the national turnout, and somehow here in Florida, it was the great abyss. Like, we did increase turnout in Democrats, yes, but the Republicans increased turnout more. And that's we gotta understand it does not matter if we do better if we don't do enough to win. And we got to be thinking about that. So that's what this conversation is really about. And you talked about talking to NPAs and others, and that's exactly what I want to get to. And I want to say, one more point before we move over.
I was just going to say, I mean, I hope this hasn't been said already, which is that you can't treat Florida as one size fits all.
No.
And that's, I mean, I think that's been a big mistake, you know, but I just wanna make that point because I don't think we can talk that way about Florida.
Okay, I'm gonna ask you to just hold on to your questions so we move on to the next one, because we may address what you want to talk about in the next bullet. Remember, I've got 7 topics here because I want to try to stay somewhat, organized. Next is, who are we? And the reason I ask this question is because I think a lot of voters are asking that question. Who are we? Who are we? Who are our voters? And how do our voters see us? Because we are the activists of the Democratic Party, right? We're the ones that show up at the meetings and go to the caucuses and go to Leadership Blue, and we're the ones who do that. So who are we? What does that look like? What does a Democratic Party look like? Who are we? Who votes for us? Yes.
We're afraid to speak up, and I agree with this man. We're afraid to get in people's faces. We just don't have the same energy that Republicans have.
Right.
Republicans speak, you
Right.
get it known, and they stay on topic, and you never get off.
Right. So if I were to rephrase what I just heard you say, we don't confront, which is another way of saying we're wimpy. We're viewed as wimpy and passive. Do you think that that's true?
Yes.
I think there's the moderate Democrats and there's the progressive Democrats. You know what progressive Democrats
I agree. But even if it's true that more progressive Democrats are not afraid to get in people's faces, if I had a nickel for every time I did an event in this area, we did it in the community, and all these Democrats got together, and everybody said, oh my God, I had no idea how many Democrats were in this community. I thought it was all Republican. And the first thing that goes through my mind is, pourquoi? Why is it that so many people feel like they don't ever see other Democrats?
Because they're not as organized as Republicans.
Yes.
They're poorer, the party is poor, they don't throw the money in and keep us organized when we're not fighting an election and we're transactional.
Amen.
We organize 3 months before a major election.
Couldn't agree with you
And
more.
we're scrambling like lunatics when the shit hits the fan.
Exactly. That you are 100% right, and that's what we're going to get to. Let me ask you something. Did you see people in Pam Keith t-shirts?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So you may not know anything about that person, but you knew that there was something that connected you to that person. That is why my campaign chose to emphasize t-shirts over all other things. And we got kind of lambasted a little bit about that, but one thing is, look, if you see a Pam Keith t-shirt, you know you are dealing with somebody who shares your values. And other people starting to become curious. The first time you see a Pam Keith t-shirt, you don't even notice it. The second time it's like, that looks kind of familiar. The third time is, what the hell is this Pam Keith? The fourth time is like, wow, looks like everybody's with Pam Keith. The fifth time is like, I gotta give me a Pam Keith t-shirt. Right? That's how it works. It's about identity, but we don't have identity, do we?
So,
Well,
Yes.
I moved down here from New Jersey 5 years ago, and you say identity, right? I was searching for places to go to connect, and you can't find
You
it.
can't find it.
And Florida has become now the 3rd most populous state in the country, right? And many people coming from the Northeast, which are more blue than red. How are we not finding the
How are we not
connection?
finding
So I think
anybody?
that's one of the gaps that we have to fill.
Absolutely. So let me agree, disagree with this statement. Number one, Florida Democrats, period. We believe in inclusion and diversity. Yes. We believe in protecting the environment.
Yes.
We believe in taking care of our seniors and our veterans.
Yes.
We believe in balanced government that makes sense.
Yes.
We believe in infrastructure investment and public schooling.
Yes.
Right? That's what we believe. That's who we are.
Healthcare.
We believe in science. We believe in health coverage. Right? But basically, our true north is we believe in making this country and the government work for the people. Right? Correct?
Yes.
And a deep underpinning of that is that I do actually give a damn about you. That is a deep underpinning of being a Democrat as far as I'm concerned. That I actually do care about your well-being. It is not all about me. And my driving principle as a Democrat and as a human and as an American and as a patriot is that your well-being is inextricably tied to my own. That makes me a nice person. If your driving principle is how do I keep as much of my stuff and screw you, then yeah, you're not a Democrat. But Joyce's not really a nice person. I'm just saying, you know, I'm not accusing, I'm just saying.
You're not a Christian. My husband's always telling people.
That's not a Christian principle
You're
either.
a Christian? No, you're not.
That's not a Christian principle.
No, that's part of why we don't confront.
Right, we don't confront because we are so nice. We don't confront because we don't want to be accusatory. Right? We don't confront because we don't want to be inflammatory. We don't confront because we're the ones who are always asked to find common ground. As a Democrat, I'm sick and tired of the word bipartisan. Because to me, that's just code for doing the Republican way.
Amen.
That's the way I hear it, because I'm not hearing them ever talk about doing it our way as part of bipartisan
Well,
analysis.
Brian Mass does.
Right? Yes, Rudy.
See,
I'm not gonna get you next.
here's a couple things that we gave in on, we shouldn't have given in on.
Mhm.
We allowed them to frame the ACA,
Mhm.
and we didn't fight back.
Mhm.
So They
everything.
They turned off a whole bunch of people. Now, people are going, oh, wait a minute. This is pretty good. I don't want them to take this away.
Exactly. But whose fault was that?
That was our
Whose
fault.
job was it to sell the ACA?
Well, and it was.
And I love Obama, but I'm sorry, but
I
that
just
was
think
not
he's
done
doing a
wrong.
good enough job.
Like, I'm gonna give you something now that they're doing to us,
Mm,
and we're not fighting back.
well,
Open borders.
yes.
I don't know a damn Democrat that wants open borders.
But that's,
Keep saying it.
yes, but,
Like, we just wanna let this.
okay.
One at a time.
So what I want to say is yes, Shelley, you understand.
You know, say, who are we? Being new to this thing, and only the last year or so that I've been involved, for obvious reasons, and coming from a different persuasion of politics, the Democrats don't talk in a singular voice.
Yes.
They don't, they're fragmented. And
Fragmented.
therefore, trying to get them together is why they are separated. There is no leadership talking in a singular voice to get them together.
Amen. Okay.
Messages.
Okay. Yes. Susan.
I think there's one area where the party, I won't say Democrats, is not inclusive. And that is, we had Eric Johnson come to our group and speak, and he said that, from Speaking Up in America, and he said that Democrats, if you convert to Democrat, they punish you. Well, if you convert to Republican, they reward you. They give you an even bigger job than you had as a Democrat. And I've been a lifelong independent, and I became a Democrat vote for you in the primary. And I have not been well received by the Democrats, and I've been punished by the Democratic structure. I'm not saying by Democrats, by any of you, but by the structure. And with about a third of the voters being independents, we have to find a way to embrace voters.
Thank you, Susan. Can I just look at how brilliant you are, because you just transitioned to point 3. Who do we talk to? Who do we talk to? And the reason I wanted to raise this question is exactly what you're talking about. And I think part of the reason that one of the things that I find interesting about living in a state in Florida as opposed to living in a state like Illinois that I've lived in, or California that I've lived in, or Massachusetts that I've lived in, is that we aren't sure if the people around us are also Democrats. You go to California, you got a 90% chance the person sitting next to you is Democrat. Or New York, or DC, or, many of us come from places like that, right? Where the overwhelming majority of people around you are of your same political persuasion. But one of the things that I think we don't do a particularly good job of is talking to people that are not within our circle, not within our neighborhood, not within our community. We are more siloed in this state than I have seen people in other states. And we also are more fearful of engaging in conversations that are rooted in politics because it's so verboten in Florida. I love watching football, but you better believe every time I go watch football, I end up talking politics.
Yeah.
Right? And I'm not supposed to, I know I'm not supposed to, but how do I share with people my values? And that's one of the things that I want to talk about today, is that we need to be talking about our values more than we talk about our party. Because when people start to truly believe that we live those values, that we are those values, and that those are the values that they share with us, they're gonna start following us and congregating with us, even if they're not particularly interested in party politics. And Susan, as an aside to you, nobody has been more kicked to the side by the structure of the party than myself. I'm just gonna say. Okay, so I mean, I believe me, I get how hard it is to penetrate when you are viewed as an outsider and not welcome. But the party is not the structure. The party is all of us. The party is all of us, and everywhere that we reach and everywhere that we touch. And one of the biggest problems we have is that we do things that are satisfactory to the people that are in the structure and completely alienating or totally nonsensical to the people outside of the structure. And then when they don't come in, we have a room full of people, and it's always the same people, and it's always the same choir. Then we wonder, well, why is it that we're not reaching out to people that are regular rank and file folk? Yes, Pam.
Pam, I hope in your presentation you will address the economics of politics in Florida.
Absolutely, I will. And we'll talk about that. I'm going to talk, right now we're talking about who should we be talking to? Who do we talk to? Our vote, what it takes for us to win is a portion of consistent voters and then a portion of inconsistent or non or first time voters, right? Is that true? Is that a fair statement?
Yes.
And we always have a much more difficult time figuring out how to get to those outside, those non-voters. But here's what I'm going to posit to you, and you guys can reject it as stupid or whatever. The problem we have with that is that the only machine that talks to those people is candidates and candidate campaigns. Mm-hmm. Am I wrong?
No.
Okay. That to me is a fundamental structural problem with our party. Is that it does not talk to anybody but itself until candidates come along to talk to others. And it is my personal opinion that until we fix that, we are never going to get better. We've got to start thinking about the party machinery being a voter contact machinery and not a social machinery. Now, you may say that I don't know what I'm talking about. It's possible that I don't, but I think I do, because here's why. I have campaigned over this entire state. 4 to 18 was not my first race. My first race was for U.S. Senate. Now, you all know that somebody coming up, I didn't blew from nowhere running for U.S. Senate, cray, but I only had one mechanism to talk to people, which is to go to the clubs and caucuses and events all over the state, which I did. And here's something I can tell you about our clubs and caucuses. They're wonderful people. I fell in love with them all, but they have the same structure and mechanism. They show up once a month. They plan their Kennedy King dinner. They do their 50-50 raffle. They have speakers come in, and most clubs have more candidates show up than members. Okay, that's what I believe to be true. Now, I can be totally wrong. John, tell me why I'm wrong.
It's not that you're wrong. It's just that I'm hoping that people maybe stop seeing things as they always have been. At the last club meeting, the whole time was spent in a discussion of what can we do for the next election.
Exactly.
How can we get the NPAs involved? Our discussion was very much mirroring your discussion. So I'm kind of hoping, I feel like a lot of people think that the structure is outside of this group, and I wish we'd be more inclusive.
Right.
If you were ostracized, I hope you make that voice clear.
Right.
And I hope if people have been ostracized by the Dem Club or the DEP in Martin County, that they come and make it clear so we can fix it.
Okay,
We want to
But
be
that's an
inclusive.
important point, that's Martin County, and not for nothing, but we're particularly awesome.
Right.
Not
So,
for
well,
nothing.
all right, so can
But
I
we
take
need
a...
more people to come with us.
Yes.
At our club
So
meetings and our
can I take a moment, because I think John's point is valid. Can I take a moment to tell you how I see a shift? Would that be helpful? Here's how I see a shift. What if our clubs, caucuses, and precinct captures, I'm going to get to that in a hot second. What if, instead of meeting once a month, they met twice a month, and instead of having people come talk to them, they talk to other people. So let's say you met twice a month, and at the top of the month, you send a postcard to every new Democrat in your district. Every single one gets a postcard. Every single one gets a phone call. Every single one gets an email. You have specific events that you invite people to just for social purposes or connection purposes. What if you had an education alert to all of the voters of Democratic and registered Dems and MPAs and anybody that's in your district that alerted them to a new legislative thing coming up, a new election coming up? We have an election in March. How many of our voters do you think know that we have an election coming up in 3 months?
But to do that, you have to have a database that works and is good.
Yes.
And working this last election, I noticed that the county database was not up to. We had people that we called, the phones were disconnected, things were wrong. It was almost useless.
It is almost useless, but the problem with the database is that you have to actually work it to fix it.
But obviously,
but
it
you
was
can't.
worked only at the time
Of
for
the
election
election.
and not all year.
Exactly. Exactly. Because remember what I just said about 20 minutes ago, or maybe it was 10. Anyway, I just said part of our problem is that we leave the talking to voters to candidates and candidate campaigns. Right? So wouldn't it be interesting if we created a mechanism within the party that's talking to voters all the time? And as it's working it all the time, let's just say that in January, we start gathering our precinct captains and our clubs and caucuses, and we start going through that database, making calls, making phone calls, texting people. When we get information that's bad, we can cut it out of the system so that we have a full 2 years of cleaning up the database before the candidates even come into the picture.
That's what we did, but it was too late.
It was too late.
in the election.
Right, well, I'm proposing that we start doing it in January. Anybody opposed?
Yeah.
Okay, you have a question over there.
Well, no, just a comment, I mean, because I'm a precinct leader, and technically we actually are supposed to start talking to the people, voters in our precinct, well in advance of the election. But the problem is that the precinct leader express that we all get with our marching orders concentrates pretty much on what we're supposed to do is contact everybody who is not yet signed up for vote by mail. And we are also supposed to not bother with those who are considered cold voters.
That's right.
And we don't talk to our hot voters really, we concentrate on our warm voters. And that just strikes me as like, well, no, we need to talk to everybody because especially cold voters are who we want to be able to get out.
Exactly. So hold on. I'm going to take everybody's comments because I love that you guys are thinking. I hope this is helpful to you. This is stimulating. Okay. I want to go back to what I was talking about. Who do we talk to? Who are our voters? Who are our warm and cold Dems? Who are our MPAs? Who are our future voters? Who are our future voters? Do we have a program to contact future voters? Here's an idea. I'm going to put it out here, right now. I think we need a program, a funded program to talk to teen and preteen people. My idea is to create a scholarship of $10,000 or $5,000, whatever scholarships, where the kids put a music video, a piece of original art, an essay or spoken word, where they talk about democratic values, right? And we do it twice a year, and it's different groups of different ages, so that they have to actually research what our democratic values are. And if you put some good money behind that, even if $100,000, which is, by the way, pennies on the dollar of what we spend on commercials, but if you've got a whole bunch of 13, 14, 15-year-olds talking on Instagram about democratic values, my feeling is that's going to give us some traction with young people. But the fact that we make an effort to connect with them, show up at their events, show up at their football games, and so on. So when they see that we are actually care about them, because what we do is we try to shame them into voting without being present in their lives at any other point in time. And quite frankly, I don't think that's convincing. They vote because they want to, not because we want them to. But if we give them some reason to want to be with us, I think they will. Because I think their values and our values line up a hell of a lot better than their values in the GOP.
Yes.
That's true.
Okay.
Yes. Okay, hold on. We got a whole lot. Yes. You had a couple.
One question.
Yes.
I don't understand the difference between an MPA and an independent.
Okay, I'll explain that. An NDPA is a person who registers with no party. There is actually an independent party in Florida. It is not certified at this time, but there is such a thing. The reason independent and MPA are used interchangeably is because both groups have no real party structure. There's no caucus of the independents, there's no independent convention, there's no, like, right, there is not a thing. You can get on the ballot with I next to your name, but people are using the term interchangeably when they're not really interchangeable. Does that make sense?
Because in other states, independent is the same thing as MPA.
Right, yes, yes.
There is a program for getting young people involved with voting. It is under the League of Women Voters, and Speaking Up for America joined with the League and other organizations in the county. We were in every high school in the fall. 1,975 students were registered. Yes, it was nonpartisan, but how do you think those students are leaning overall? So there is a project, and I agree with you, we need to work with teens, and there's something the Democratic world can do, but do know, there's a project. One more thing.
Yes, ma'am.
The League of Women Voters has a system of texting every student who registered to remind them to go and vote.
All of that is, and I love that. And so what I'm saying is not that this doesn't exist. What I'm saying is that it was the League of Women Voters that did that. Why is that not the Democratic Party that's doing that?
Yeah.
Right?
Wait,
And-
one reason to follow that brings about the importance for democratic initiatives, because what we've just found,
Is it
when
works?
you said, well, how are those young
Works
people
wrong.
gonna vote? My contention is they're gonna vote like their parents,
Yes.
more than like their peers. So now we have a greater challenge to get out to those youth, now that they're registered, which is good.
Yes. I got so many questions. You guys know.
This is not a question, it's a comment.
Yes.
Just to go back to who we are. I think we are seen as the party that taxes, okay? And that is the biggest problem that we have in terms of how we are seen. And you have people coming to the state because they don't want to pay taxes. And they're living better, perhaps, than they lived in the state that they came from. And they're terrified that that's going to be taken away from them. And
100% true.
the greed issue, the money issue, supersedes their Christian values or their Jewish values and Muslim values, whatever values they have. And that is the problem, I think, that Democrats are seen as taxers. We tax them to death.
Okay, and you know you're 100% right. I'm going to get to messaging in a heartbeat. Okay, because I want to try to stay a little bit. I mean,
Okay, I thought that was
trying to
who
work
you are.
with me, you know. I'm trying to stay a little bit organized, but we are going to talk about messaging in a hot minute. I want you yes, you had a question or comment.
Well, I have a comment, and I'm glad you addressed the teenage issue because underneath this dyed hair, there's a lot of white hair, and I think a lot of people here have it as well. So I'd really love to see more teens involved, and I work with teens in this election. But the thing that concerned me the most during this election is that there were people that were begging for funding for both Creole radio stations and for Hispanic radio stations, which could have run constant messages. Claudia got money and she was on the radio, the Spanish-speaking radio constantly. We could have had for $50,000 every Creole station in the state running non-stop messaging, and they didn't get it. And I think that's a critical need.
I think that is 100% right. But that also ties back into who's doing the talking, right? Because it goes back to this question that the only people who talk to voters are candidates and candidate campaigns. I spent money, what little I had, on Haitian radio and Spanish radio. Y'all know I did. And that was helpful to me. But it was so late in our process because that's when I had the money. What would happen? What would happen if right now, like January the 7th, we started a sophisticated, thoughtful ad campaign that just said, thank a Democrat.
Yeah.
Thank a Democrat for Social Security.
Right.
Thank a Democrat for environmental protection. Thank a Democrat for Medicare. Thank grandmas and Medicaid. Thank a Democrat. Even if we did one kind of cohesive advertising that was about what our values are and had it in Creole and had it in Spanish and Vietnamese and whatever other language we need to have it in, have targeted banner ads, have targeted social media ads that go now. Not thank this candidate, thank these values. These values are meaningful to you.
But you know what, Pam? I don't think the Democratic Party listens. I have written 20,000 letters, emails, phone calls, snail mails. Did they ever respond to me?
No, they didn't.
Once.
You know who they do respond to? They respond to their money. So we need to maybe shift our strategy. right? Because donors are the ones who influence the party. So who influences the donors? Their customers, we do, their friends, their neighbors, the people they go to synagogue or church with. That's who influences them. So, but follow me here. This is not rocket science. I remember when I was a kid, there was this thing called Schoolhouse Rock. Anybody remember Schoolhouse Rock? How much did I learn up from Schoolhouse Rock? Conjunction, junction, what's the function? Look, that constant, low-level, what I call subliminal messaging that permeates when your barriers are not up. Because a lot of times we only advertise during election cycles when everybody is trained to cut off any political ads. They get sick of them right away, and then they just start tuning them out. And we spend more and more and more money on them when a thoughtful, strategic plan to spend the money way earlier in a totally different context makes more sense. You could do some really smart, moving ads about kids getting an education, about an immigrant, about the environment. You could do a really moving ad right now about dead manatees, right? Blue green algae. How the Sam Hill did Rick Scott get away with destroying our environment? How did he get away with that? Because Red Tide Rick only came up in the context of an election. That's why. Matt, you want to say something?
I did, real quick. In terms of financing, in terms of need for technology, and in terms of reaching out to young people, you got to give young people a job. You got to make them be involved.
Absolutely.
And the way to do that is put them in charge of helping us out with technology,
Absolutely.
advertising, and all that
Absolutely.
stuff. And they can do it for cheap.
They can do it for cheap or for free or for college
really,
credit or whatever.
really well.
So here's another idea that I have, because remember I said I was going to talk about solutions. Anybody hear me say that? Yes. Here's another thing. Hold on just a second. I'll be right with you. One of the things that my campaign did was that we were constantly posting photos and videos of Team Pam out in the community. Constantly. Now, what would happen if we had a brigade of people who posted constantly about Democrats doing stuff in their community? Not just in Florida 18, but all over the state. Democrat, and even if you use the same hashtag, values in action or something. Dem values in action. And what if we had smart, thoughtful social media warriors all over the state that were showing what democratic values actually look like in people's lives? Wouldn't that be cool?
Yes.
And by the way, that could even be free. I mean, you may have to pay them, but you wouldn't have to pay for the spread, would you? No. Ma'am, you had a question, and then I'm going to come back to you, Peggy.
That was what I was going to say. 90% of this room listens to the news 24/7. I guarantee that.
Yes, ma'am.
We don't need to be so. We know everything that's going on. We know the names of half the people in this room. And it's not our job. So we are not going to necessarily be doing the work of organized party. It would be wonderful, but we're not. However, if your posts and your social media shows just your own network that you know what you're talking about, they will turn to you for answers.
Absolutely.
So many people turn to me about the amendments, and I got it from Laura Kane from Indivisible. I knew the answers on every amendment. I spread the word. That in itself, coming from their own normal, everyday people, you are going to get the word out if people think you have the answer.
Absolutely, 100% right.
And the other thing is, the Republicans co-opted our values. All of a sudden, they're for the working man. All of a sudden, they're for the
But we didn't confront the bullshit, I'm sorry. Yes. Hold on, everybody, let's let Peggy speak here.
It also depends on the demographics of where you live.
Yes.
And I know we're targeting young people, which is the hope of our party. But you can also do hard copy for a quarter of the price. There are many people in my area who do not have a computer. I have taken hard copy things and pushed onto the door. And so many people call me, I put my number there, and they call me, when is this, what is this, how is this?
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. There are many ways of skinning the cat. But the thing is, we as a party have grossly underused social media as a way of getting out our message. We rely on candidates and campaigns to do so. In fact, anytime, it is my view, it is my opinion, that anytime it is a major issue going on in Florida, we should not have the FDP sending out a press release. We should have a brigade of Democratic warriors all over the state talking about what is right, what is wrong, and why our view is the better view. And it should be shown in video and in photos and in every kind of music video and hard copy and everything. We should be pushing that out. And even if we need one person titularly leading and saying this is where Democrats stand, what we need to know is that one person alone means nothing. It must be echoed and reinforced and shared and copied so that it sinks in. And it take you, then you, then you, then you. Yes. I'm not ignoring you. Yes.
As I think the only teenager in this room, nobody is going to listen to old people on social media.
No.
That's just not going to happen.
No.
So I would like. So it's so wild to think that people are like, because young people can't get to these meetings.
No.
But like, let me try and figure out what I'm trying to say. Young people can't get to these meetings, but young people are only going to listen to other young people.
Amen.
So we need to figure out how we're going to get young people like me to places like that.
You know, well, first of all, you're 100% right. Can I just echo what you just said? This generation, this Gen, whatever, 55,000, this Gen Z is the generation that is more influenced by their peers than any generation before them. Right? So that's what I'm thinking. We have to have an Instagram brigade. Right? We have to have young people like you on Instagram talking about why you believe this. Don't talk about why you believe Democrats, because nobody believes